Ravens Vale is a dark fantasy horror anthology podcast that may contain explicit language and thematic elements not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Ravens Vale, a dark fantasy Southern Gothic horror anthology podcast set in the shadowy world of the Deep South. A convergent reality situated around what most of humanity has accepted as the truth. Obscured from human eyes, Ravens Vale is a mystical sanctuary intended to preserve the existence of its immortal inhabitants. The Mekori, commonly referred to as witches, have been hunted since before written history. The witches of the Highlands fled persecution to a new land that would come to be known as Appalachia. In these parts, you should always be leery of the things that scare witches. The veil is thin tonight, family. Let's see what darkness lies beyond.
Hello, family. I'm Jeryd Bolden-Greer, the creator of the world of Ravens Vale, and I'm excited to share some thrilling news with you all. In the spirit of creativity, and with hearts full of gratitude for your unwavering support, we've embarked on a magical journey to revisit the very beginning of our story. The cast and crew of the Ravens Vale podcast are thrilled to announce this special release of an enhanced version of Episode 0, The Convergence. This isn't just a simple recording. It's a labor of love crafted with the same passion and dedication that you've come to expect from Ravens Vale. Because we never want to forget where we came from, we'll keep the original just where it is as a reminder. I've listened to that episode probably 50 times since we started, and each time I've noted things that could have been done better. One of the greatest things about world building and storytelling is that you're unlimited in what you can do and where your story can take you. And podcasting is a fantastic medium for doing just that. We've poured our souls into reimagining this foundational episode, hoping that every whisper of the wind and every shadow of the night is more vivid and immersive than ever before. We've woven new threads of magic into our tale, adding to the story that started it all. We invite you to join us once again in a long time ago to untell the story of Ravens Vale. Whether you're a long-term listener or a newcomer to our world, this special episode is our gift to you. A heartfelt thank you for being a part of our family. So get you something to drink, settle into your favorite chair on the porch, and let the magic of Ravens Vale envelop you. The story awaits. I watched a single raindrop slowly trail down the window pane of the old home place. An old painted lady at the end of an old dirt road out in the woods in the middle of nowhere in Greer, South Carolina. The house where my mother had been born and where my grandparents had lived their entire life. On this rainy day, the house was dark and cold. I guess it was my house now. I took a deep, weary breath and said, "I'll tell you the story. I'll do my best to tell it exactly how Granddad told it to my brother and me. It's the telling of an ancient tale that reaches as far back as time itself. No, I think rather it's the untelling of that story." I took a long drink of the hot chocolate that was quickly cooling down in Granddad's favorite mug, and I let the memories wash over me. Let's go out on the front porch and get comfortable. It's going to take a while to untell it all. I sat down in Granddad's old rocking chair and started to slowly rock back and forth to get my rhythm. The rain smelled sweet against the tall grass that had grown unattended for the last few weeks. The air had started to cool off some, laying the way for the leaves to begin changing their color. I had visited here so many times throughout my life, but as is too often the case, I never really seen the beauty of the Blue Ridge Mountains until today. My, oh my, what I had taken for granted. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to sense the magic that was all around me. I'd cut that part of my life out after my mom and pop had passed away some 20 years ago. Mama and Granddad had raised me mostly. They were good people. The last time I'd been here was a few months ago, when I'd headed down to Knoxville to settle some business and to celebrate my 30th birthday. That was just before everything went sideways. Now, I'm getting off track. Y'all are going to find out I do that a whole lot while I untell this story. Well, I guess we better get on with it. Here goes. The fog felt impenetrable in the crisp, cool morning as the Luna Corsiva anchored in the shallows just off the coast of what would one day be known as South Carolina. In dreams and visions, Giles Ashford and his kind, the Mekori, had been guided to this hallowed land to build a place of sanctuary. More specifically, to a lush, bountiful land about 200 leagues inland, where 4 powerful magical ley lines intersected, forming a unique happenstance that made the pristine land ideal for their cause. Giles had been chosen to lead 12 of his Mekori brothers and sisters on a voyage from their homeland in the highlands of Caledonia to this new world of sanctuary. On the 8th day of March in the year 535 A.D., the group bowed their heads and uttered silent words of gratitude to Nadira. The 13 Mekori all took 3 steps towards the stern of the ship and then suddenly appeared on the untouched shorelines. Unsure of their surroundings, they began cautiously and painstakingly weaving and interweaving magical protective wards around each member as they glinted onto the white sand beaches. Since the beginning of life on this planet, the Mekori, or what we now know as witches, have been a part of this world. For a time, the Mekori evolved peacefully beside humans. It was possible for humans to gain the gift of magic, although their abilities were limited to say the least. That's because they lacked a fully developed pineal gland. In contrast, the Mekori were born blessed with a more evolved pineal gland. This allowed them to naturally generate their innate powers through a profound connection between the physical and spiritual worlds, enabling them to control magic effortlessly. Most humans struggle to develop magic, but with training and augmentation, humans could become adept with cantrips and enchantments. Human biology leaned towards the magic of the Earth Ascension, although not exactly. Perhaps it was a limitation placed on them by the divine. You know, from dust you come, to the dust you shall return. It was rumored that the Mekori were made of something other. The human race has always been a tad arrogant, and the whole limitation thing never really did sit well with them, leading to the first of many calamities. Before the world had spoken language, or even the concept of a written language, the Mekori discovered their mystical gifts. Limited as they may have been, they wielded this unspoken magic to heal and nurture. Their powers were rudimentary but growing. Over the centuries, the Mekori honed their abilities into a sophisticated, magical system that they refined and passed on to their children and their children's children. Now, unlike their human counterparts, the Mekori were unacquainted with death. Their immortality enabled them to expand their natural powers far beyond mere healing, transforming it into a source of well-nigh limitless power. Yet, with unlimited power and immortality, they still feared their mortal weaknesses. As humanity began to truly grasp the magnitude of their power, envy spread among those around them. A clandestine faction of jealous Greek politicians devised a covert scheme to enslave or eradicate the Mekori from existence. Deceived into believing the witches were born of the darkest evil, society began to turn against them. Accused of causing every horrible event throughout history, the Mekori were persecuted, hunted, tortured, and murdered. And so to save their species, they scattered themselves among the world of humans and waited. After this treacherous betrayal, the Mekori's numbers dwindled, and the witches decided to leave the world of humans to find a sanctuary where they could live in peace. Under the cover of their magical protections, they returned to the ship to rest before the long trek into the unknown. Near sunset, they gathered again on the beach and began moving inward towards the land that would become their sanctuary. Drawn by the power of the ley lines and Giles' vision, they began using their magic to cut a rough path through the dense undergrowth. To the common eye, the path would appear as if it were a long-forgotten game trail. Even with magic, the clearing was slow and arduous, requiring long hours of concealment spells to shroud their path from anyone or anything that might be watching. The vision had been clear. The new land must be hidden from the reaches of everyone except the chosen few. For 8 sleepless days and nights they journeyed cautiously, being overly observant of their surroundings. At sunrise on the 9th day, the group crested a small hill and were overtaken by the raw power of the ley lines and the beauty of the untouched valley that rested at the foot of the mountain range that would later be known as a part of the great Appalachian Mountains. As they gazed in wonder over the magnificence of their new home, a legion of ravens, seemingly spooked by their presence, erupted from a nearby wooded area. The corvids darkened the sky with their frenzied flight, and the deafening screeches of their caws reminded Giles of his first vision of this new land. He knew it was a good omen, but the feeling it brought wasn't all positive. Underlying the joy of finding their sanctuary was an entirely momentary flicker of doubt he couldn't explain or dismiss. Once they had reached the heart of the convergence of the ley lines, they quickly set about hanging magical barriers, protective wards, and concealment spells covering a vast 10-mile radius of land. After the land had been secured, Giles divided the party into 3 groups. The first group was assigned to scout the land, looking for natural resources, constructing sentry points along the ley lines for security, and identifying potential threats. Each point was fortified with magical surveillance charms and intrusion enchantments. The second group was charged with magically clearing the land that would become their new home, constructing homes, communal halls, and building a fortification around the perimeter of the new town. The third group was comprised of his most trusted confidants, Sawyer Photos, Osbert Caudill, Bartholomew Callums, and Sebastian Lennox, who were directed to retrieve the rest of the Mekori from Caledonia. The 4 of them magically cleared a patch of land about 50 paces across and 25 paces wide, etching powerful sigils and runes into the soil. When the land was prepared, Osbert walked to the center of the north side of the clearing, closed his eyes, took 3 steps, and instantly disappeared. The others waited cautiously. After an agonizing 18 minutes, Osbert reappeared, holding the hand of a strikingly beautiful woman and a young boy. Once everyone saw he was back safely, the other 3 joined him in the labor of love. One by one, the men disappeared and reappeared for hours, transporting the Coven of Covens and their family members to the new land. The transportation spell, descriptively termed Glinton, was a relatively simple form of magic that all witches learned when they gained their full power around the age of 16. Glinton allowed a witch to travel anywhere they had previously been before. With some practice, a witch could master the ability to transport others just by touching them. Well, after dusk, the last of the coven arrived safely. They were exhausted from days without sleep and the continual use of magic. The coven happily feasted on wild deer before falling into a much-needed deep slumber. Just after midnight, while the embers of the fires burned low, Leticia Griogor silently slipped out of her new home and crept into the woods just beyond the magical protections to avoid detection. Her hands were shaken as she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, took several steps, and disappeared. Before the first glimmer of dusk, Leticia reappeared, hand in hand with a handsome man dressed all in black, clutching an ornamental mace. The woods were eerily silent, as if some unseen monster had driven the nocturnal creatures into hiding. Nervously, she reached up and kissed the man, embracing him one last time before she walked back through the magical wards. But as a human, he could not. A silent rustling of the tall grass just beyond the wards caught his attention, and he turned just as the first attack came. Two Mekori began a barrage of the coruscation spell, blasting torrents of white-hot lightning at him. His eyes grew wide with fear as he dodged blast after blast. Each time a blast hit him, his skin was ripped and torn like paper. The smell of scorched and burned flesh filled the air, his screams of pain disturbing the serenity of the valley, jolting everybody awake. He stumbled, quickly righted himself, closed his eyes, took 2 staggering steps, and disappeared. You see, few humans have ever become proficient at using the glint spell, but this one had. Leticia winced as she realized he had been discovered. She prayed that he had escaped as she hurriedly ran back towards her home. She never made it home. She was stopped by a couple of leaders and taken to the middle of the village. Everything fell silent for a long moment as everyone hurriedly gathered to the center of their new town. The 2 Mekori, who had battled with the intruder, walked somberly over to Giles and quietly whispered in his ear. His face twisted in a mask of pain and fury as the harsh reality seized him. He openly sobbed as the sting of her betrayal, after all they had done to escape, left him unable to do anything but whisper, "Leticia." Leticia's shoulders slumped as she saw Giles avert his eyes, unable to meet hers. Her face paled, and her lips trembled with unspoken apologies, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her as she realized the significance of her actions. Her eyes, once bright with confidence, now shimmered with unshed tears, reflecting the depth of her remorse. She clasped her hands together, wringing them nervously as if trying to hold on to the last fragments of her shattered resolve. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken pain. The air suddenly had an electrical charge as each coven leader began to draw in power from the ley lines, slowly encircling Leticia. Terrified, she began begging for her life, begging to be spared from being banished to the wastes, explaining how she loved Godfrey, begging not to be stilled. Her words became wells of unintelligible words as her fear overtook her. With a cunning flick of her finger, Isabella Photo silenced Leticia, rendering her completely silent. Isabel placed her fingers gently on Leticia's temples. Closing her eyes, her lips moving silently, she turned to Giles and shook her head, confirming his darkest fear. With shaking hands, Melanya Ashford, the older sister of both Leticia and Giles, pushed her way into the circle, a vacant expression on her pale face. When she saw it was Leticia, her hand quickly went to cover her mouth in shock. She embraced Leticia, kissing her gently on the forehead. With tears filling her eyes, she looked sadly at her baby sister and said,
"Leticia, tell me it's not true. You may have condemned us all to death. I can't believe you would betray us like this. Why?
With shaking hands, she gently placed the palm of her right hand onto Leticia's forehead and whispered,
The waste is a place of no return, a place of misery and loneliness. The thought of you being lost there forever, it breaks my heart.
tears streaming down both of their faces as Melanya whispered the stilling spell.
Nulla potentia.
A light pulsed beneath her hand, growing brighter and more intense. Leticia's forehead throbbed with pain as the light drew the very essence of magic from her being. She gasped, feeling the last threads of her power siphoned away, leaving her hollow and empty and afraid. Slowly, Giles stepped forward with a stricken look on his face, as if he was asking why she had betrayed him. He kissed her gently on top of the head and gave her one last embrace. Memories of his sweet little Leticia playing in the garden filled his mind with more sadness than he thought possible. Placing his hand on her chest, he softly said,
Expulsus actutum.
A chill swept through the circle as a rift tore open in the fabric of time and space behind Leticia. With a gentle yet decisive push from Giles, the void hungrily devoured her. In mere seconds, she vanished into the abyss, leaving only an eerie silence in her wake. Melanya collapsed to the ground, her sobs piercing the heavy silence that enveloped the group. Bewildered and somber, they slowly returned to their homes, leaving Giles and Melanya alone in their grief. One thought was on everyone's mind. Are we safe? Well, it's getting late, and I think we need to go to bed. The funerals today have worn me out, and I'll tell you more tomorrow. Anyway, all that to say, this is the beginning of Ravens Vale. Well, alrighty, family. We hope you enjoyed this little nugget of nostalgia. For those of you who have been with us from the get-go, thank you. For those that have just joined the family, we have a lot of twists and turns coming down the road that we know you're going to love. It's late, and well, the sun rises early in Ravens Vale, so I reckon you better get on home. If you like what you've heard in this episode, make sure you tune in to our next episode to see what kind of stuff is being brewed up. Now, family, you adults have a few chores to do. Go on over to ravensvale.com and see about doing your chores on social media. Follow us on all the social media platforms that we've made available just for you folks. Like, listen, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't mind, leave us a good rating and a kind comment. You can find the Ravens Vale podcast on your favorite podcast platform. If you haven't already, just search for Ravens Vale Podcast. And again, make sure you hit the follow button to stay up to date with all our latest episodes. Oh, and tell a friend about us, won't you? So until next time, family, see you soon.
The Ravens Vale podcast is a production of Small Raven Media. Today's story was written, directed, and narrated by Ed Bolden-Greer. The voice of Lucian Ashford was narrated by Ed Bolden-Greer. The voice of Giles Ashford was performed by Jeryd Bolden-Greer. The voice of Leticia Griogor was performed by Veronica Williams. The voice of Melanya Ashford was performed by Lena Perkins. Audio engineering and sound design by Nick Devan at Nicky D Sound. Copyrighted 2024, Small Raven Media, all rights reserved.
Well, hey there, family. I'm Jordan Walker, the voice of Palmer Ashford here at the Ravens Vale podcast. At Ravens Vale, we love telling you our story. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Appalachian Horror Fest 2024. Appalachian Horror Fest 2024 is an evening of music and storytelling themed around the macabre. The event will take place on Saturday, October 12th, 2024 at Central Cinema in Knoxville, Tennessee from 5:30 until 9:30 p.m. Our hauntingly talented musicians will serenade you with the eerie tunes that echo through the misty Appalachian foothills. Gather round as our master storytellers weave their blood-curdling tales. Legends of restless spirits, vengeful ghosts, and ancient curses will dance in your imagination. Tickets are on sale now at AppalachianHorrorFest.com/tickets. Oh, storytellers, if your words can raise goosebumps and summon sleeping spirits, step into the spotlight. Submit your spine-chilling tale at AppalachianHorrorFest.com/storytellers. Appalachian Horror Fest, where nightmares come to life. We hope to see you there.